Eric Garner, approached by police for illegally selling loose cigarettes on the end of her corner store, later fell victim to police shooting on July 17th of 2014. Tamir Rice, a 911 call of a man with a gun, specifically African American. As the police showed up to the scene, the officer immediately fired and then killed on November 23rd of 2014. Freddie Gray, arrested for possession of a switchblade on April 12th of 2015. He then died a week later due to the injury that he sustained in the arrest. Philando Castile, stopped for a supposed out taillight. As the officer approached the window, he then explained that he had the right to have possession of his weapon, which he did at hand. The officer then proceeded to shoot with his two loved ones, his daughter and his girlfriend, who later recorded the aftermath of the shooting on Facebook Live. These are just some of many examples or instances of police brutality in today's social justice system. As you look around and you look at our group specifically, we are all minorities. So these such events hit home specifically for us four males, because now we are forced to talk to our loved ones and our families about proceeding with caution when it comes to police interaction. These events continue to happen each and every day, and as a young minority male, it's time for justice and justice in the justice system. Our judicial system in the United States is very aware of color and its effect on the minorities, which is obviously at a disproportionate level. The biggest indicator of this is police brutality. The killing of unarmed citizens, the killing of unarmed civilians in so-called, quote, normal interactions with police needs to be addressed and needs to be figured out. Today, we will show that what laws contribute to police brutality. Good morning, class. My name is Jalen Robinson, and today we will be discussing the justice system and also the affiliation with police brutality. Which brings me into my first point. Examples of laws that foster bad policing. The first of that being stop and frisk. Well, you may ask, what is stop and frisk? The definition here states, a stop and frisk refers to a brief, non-intrusive police stop of a suspect. The Fourth Amendment requires that before stopping the suspect, the police must have a reasonable suspicion that a crime has been, is being, or is about to be committed by the suspect, which basically shows that the officer has any right to go ahead and think that somebody is doing something wrong, which is extremely vague in the sense of stop and frisk. This law has in fact been subject to many lawsuits over the years. One of the most popular states is also fell victim to the #1 stop and frisk state in the nation, which is New York. Celebrities, athletes are all subject to racial profiling in stop and frisk. Suspicion of a black male in a nice car such as a Ferrari should not fall under the stop and frisk laws. A prime example of that being Trevor Noah, a comedian in today's society. We will now show you one short, brief video of Trevor Noah's experience of stop and frisk.
Kangaroo's pouch provides comfort and security for the little ones inside. Possibly the inspiration behind Hanes Comfort Flex Fit with a breathable pouch. That and probably this. Hanes Comfort Flex Fit.
You know how crazy it is, right? I've only lived in the United States for 6 years, on and off. I lived on the West Coast 2.5 years. I've lived on the East Coast now for 2.5 years. In that time, I shit you not, I have been stopped by police. Maybe, I would say going on at least 8 to 10 times I've been stopped by the police, which always blows white people's minds, which I didn't know was a thing. So like when someone was talking about it, and then I was like, they said Philando Castile got stopped 49 times, and then I was like, oh yeah, I was like, that's crazy insane. I was like, I've only been stopped like maybe 7, 8 times. And then people were like, wait, what? What do you mean? When, where, and how? But it's the truth. I've been stopped a shit ton of times. I've been stopped in rental cars, I've been stopped in my car, I've been stopped in a car with tinted windows, a car with rims, a car with no rims, I've been stopped in a Tesla. Like a Tesla, people. Like, I don't know what silent crime you think I'm on my way to commit.
Hi, I'm Satij, and I'm here to talk about the second of the groups of laws that allow police officers to treat civilians with impunity. And those laws are called loitering laws. So loitering laws were created to allow police officers to combat problems like panhandling, gang violence, and homelessness. So that sounds pretty good, but in reality, according to Ronald Steiner's article about loitering laws in Chicago, the Supreme Court found that loitering laws in Chicago were actually unconstitutionally vague. They were so vague that they just couldn't be used for the purpose that they were created for, because police officers were able to essentially make up the situation that they would be arresting people for. The laws were that vague. One example of this is in Philadelphia. Two African American males were at a Starbucks just sitting and waiting for their business partner. The manager of the Starbucks was disturbed by this, so she came and asked the two males what they were doing. The males just said that they were waiting for a business partner. But the manager was so disturbed by these two males that she chose to call the police on them. And the police came and they saw that, hey, these two males are just sitting here waiting. They say that they're waiting for their business partner. But the police still chose to arrest them for loitering, just for sitting at a Starbucks for 20, 25 minutes. Later on, the business partner comes and he's very distressed because he has no idea why his business partners are being arrested just for sitting in a Starbucks. That doesn't seem very fair to me. So now that you guys have seen two examples of the laws that police officers can use to interact poorly with the community, Jose is here to talk about how it impacts the community.
So we know there's already a power dynamic between people and the police. And then on top of that, you add laws like stop and frisk and loitering laws, and you create a situation where there's damage to the relations of these two groups. Now, I would like to share a quote with you that we came about in our research. It is in an article called "The Policing Different Racial Groups in the United States." And in the article, one of the interviewers says, I will share with you the advice I gave my two sons, and that is, if you get pulled over by police, make sure you're in an area with people and just put your hands outside your car. Just leave them there. Don't do anything until they get there. And then even if they ask you why, just keep them there. Have your hands on side so that there are no mistakes. That quote is really powerful because it illustrates how many minority groups feel. And me and one of my classmates have had a conversation with our parents about this issue. And I myself have an anecdote of what I've talked to my parents about. My parents told me that if I ever encounter a situation where the police is involved, to just put my wallet on the dashboard so that they can see my hands can be on sight at all times. Now, this interaction sometimes can turn deadly, as we know, and that is one of the things that led to one of the most famous groups, which is Black Lives Matter. And recently, sadly, we had two new cases of minority people being killed by police for unjustified reasons. One of them being a person in Alabama that was actually an officer. He was in the Army. He was a person from the Army, and he was on his layout time. And then at the mall, there was a shootout that broke out. Alabama being an open carry state, the Army gentleman took out his gun and started to help people and escort him out of the mall. Police that arrived there saw a black man with a gun and they shot the man down. Sadly, the police thought they had the right guy all along, and they only found out they killed the wrong person because of the internet. Now, on the second case, it actually happened with the person that was a security guard. He's a security guard at Google, and he got shot while restraining an individual that was just there for no reason. And now it really begs the question, what can you do as a person of a minority group to not get killed by police? Now, there's another situation in which the police force is not very diverse. There are efforts being made by the U.S. Department of Justice Equal Employment Opportunity Communities, in which they state that their sworn officers and agencies are sworn to reflect and get more people from the communities they are actually helping. But as of now, there are not many minority officers because of as a minority kid, it's really hard to become something that you view as bad. These officers are already seen as villains, so it is unlikely that these people might become officers in the future. And now, the problem with so many officers being from different races is that there are some socioeconomic problems. That is, these officers come from other parts of the city. And as you know, coming from the outside, there can be biases that you already have. If you take an officer from a suburban Caucasian area and you bring him to the ghetto, there's a potential for a criminal mentality. That is, he sees a bunch of criminals walking around and anybody could be there to do harm to other people. And that is just unacceptable. But now, I know that this whole conversation has been sad, or that you don't see what can we do. But I actually understand that policing is very hard, and that we have to respect the people that put their lives on the line. But just because we respect them, we can't ignore that there is a problem. And I will leave it to Wilson to illustrate some of the solutions we have come up to alleviate some of the problem.
So one of the main reasons that police officers act the way that the overly brutal, violent methods that they do is primarily due to the training they receive, and they're often taught to behave and act that certain way. And so a primary solution to this would be to introduce better training and create accountability for police officers. And the first of these laws that needs to go is the stop and frisk law, which many people have complained about. And in big cities, a lot of people who are of color often complain about being stopped by police officers for no really big reason. And the Fourth Amendment directly states that prior to stopping the suspect, the police must have a reasonable suspicion that the suspect is guilty. For instance, if someone were slurring their words, driving from side to side, or their pupils wouldn't dilate when a flashlight was shined on them, this would all be pretty credible evidence that the person is guilty. Unfortunately, however, today, police have often abused this rule, and they often stop people for no really apparent reason, and it's often because the people are of color. And this leads into the issue that the police have often developed a bias that people of color tend to commit more crime, which was a problem stemming from the 1980s to today, and therefore they feel the need to be more cautious as well as act more aggressively in cases where they're dealing with minorities. And so many of the stop and frisks today therefore aren't justified, and there's often no really strong underlying reasons for stopping the people themselves. Oftentimes it's just because the police officers thought that they looked dangerous, they were doing some slightly threatening moves, or they just simply didn't belong in the neighborhood. And as a result today, minorities are impacted at a vast disproportionate rate. And according to a study done by ccrjustice.org, of the 685,724 stops made in New York in 2011, 84% of those stopped were African American or Hispanic. And of those stopped, 88% got off without being charged with a crime. Another solution to police brutality is simply to create a training program that allows police officers to empathize more with the people that they're dealing with. And this would be similar to the pepper spray training, which is used by Marines. And in that training, Marines are sprayed with pepper spray so that they can know explicitly themselves what it's like to directly be hit by that. And oftentimes today, this is an issue because police often act violent, and they often put people in headlocks or force their arms back and tell the people to stop resist. But the thing is, since those movements are so painful to those being subject from it, it's hard for them not to move around because they're in so much pain, and often they will try to move and get out of that position, and this further escalates into more conflict. And police therefore fail to understand and really emphasize what the people are dealing with, and therefore in order to solve this issue, we can create training programs that give police officers what it's like to be in these more serious cases so that they can understand what these people go through and they can know to avoid that in the future. And therefore, by doing this, we can we can get police officers a better idea of how to deal with people, as well as what situations they'll be dealing with, as well as preventing this from happening in the near future. The final solution is to improve police academies. And the first step would be to start with the right people, or giving people the right psychological training. And the people mostly entering police academies today are people who are fresh out of college and have never been in risky situations before. Therefore, many new recruits have never learned how to emphasize with people from different backgrounds, as well as deal with more serious cases. And in addition, police academies have often ill-prepared people for the jobs they will be doing. And people often tend to act overly excessively in a physical way when there is actually no need and there's a way to get out of that. And therefore, police officers have to know that there should be a need for de-escalating situations instead of intensifying them or causing them. And police officers therefore should know that it's their responsibility to settle matters and calm them in a civil manner instead of just making things worse. And instead of expecting the car chases and the shootouts seen in movies, police should expect that their situations be solved more peacefully, and therefore they can hope to have situations that prevent injury to other people as well as themselves. And police also need more human interaction programs to show them and teach themselves that the people they interact with on a daily basis can feel pain and emotion as well. And by doing this, they help get a better understanding of the community as well as regain trust from the people from within. And only a great justice system works with the trust of the people as well as the humane ways of the police officers themselves. And to help clear cases, police officers should also wear body cams which remain on from when they start their shift to when they end, so that they can record any altercations and give an understanding to the public that everything is controlled and is at hand, so that there are no misconceptions. And only by doing this can we ensure a safer and more peaceful and humane justice system.
To recap what we've said so far, Jalen and I talked about some laws that allow police to treat citizens unfairly. Jose talked about some ways that this impacts the community. And then Wilson talked about some ways that police academies and police can work together to help stop some of these dangerous situations from coming up. One thing that you guys could do as citizens is go to the American Civil Liberties Union website, and you can look on there to see ways that you can protect yourself and protect the people around you from dangerous situations. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, it's not the words of our enemies that we remember, but the silence of our allies. Thank you.